summertime there, like sometimes there's so many mosquitoes that when you walk outside, you can hear the sound of mosquitoes droning.
Wow.
Which is crazy. You step out and you just hear like this, like, this like really low but distant, and you can't point to where it's coming from. It's just like this, like, and you're like, okay, put on the long sleeves.
That's rough.
And like the bug spray and stuff. But then as soon as you step out, there's going to be like 20 of them on your face. And there's actually this thing that Finnish people do where you take your bottom lip and you go, and I can't really do it, but like you make a directed jet of air that's like almost like a windshield wiper of your face. And it's a thing that like people just know how to do. It's weird. And yeah, and they're like they're like these aggressive as fuck mosquitoes too, that are like even more thirsty than these mosquitoes because there's like 10 billion mosquitoes and the only animal in like 10 miles radius is like one moose. And like most of these mosquitoes are never going to eat their entire life. And if you don't eat, you don't breed. And so they just they're like kamikaze drones that just have like, just like, this is your one shot. Are you going to let it slip? And they're not going to let it slip. They're going to, go on a kamikaze death plunge into try to get your blood. So these mosquitoes are positively tame. Like they seem like anemic, and like they're like, this is a pretty bountiful place. If I don't bite this thing, I'll bite another thing. So, yeah.
What should we talk about first?
Bloodsuckers. What were we talking about just a second ago?
Bitcoin.
You're talking about, you watched a podcast, 4-hour Lex Friedman podcast about this dude who was a Bitcoin maximalist, and you were telling me how he was making an argument about how Bitcoin is the only kind of money that will never stop increasing in value.
And its value can't be tampered with.
Yeah.
Anyone who can increase the money supply can basically steal your money by devaluing your money. And obviously that's what a fiat currency is. Anyone who borrows a bunch of money, the Federal Reserve apparently just makes that new money for you to borrow.
This is what Ron Paul's been saying since 2008.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. The funny thing is Ron Paul was kind of like the Bitcoin guy before there was even Bitcoin.
Well, it's the Randian and Austrian School of Economics aesthetic. A tale as old as time.
You know what's interesting is think about what the world would be like if the default currency was in like fundamentally a deflationary currency.
Well, Safetian's argument was that total war and world war was only made possible by fiat currency.
Woodrow Wilson.
You just can't afford it if you have to literally fork over the gold to pay for the war. And so wars were very circumscribed and symbolic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Being able to motivate large numbers of people to sign up involves the ability to print money. And I think the ability to go off on any kind of like completely unchecked enterprise where you pay a bunch of people with money that you print out of thin air is potentially a pretty destructive thing because it removes the upper limit on...
Well, it's statism, it's communism. Yeah. It's not paying them with money you printed out of thin air. It's paying them by stealing the money from your population's savings.
You know what's interesting?
And the only ceiling on when you have to stop is when your population has no more value to live or feed themselves anymore to be stolen from.
I'm imagining like, yeah, let's say you were like, you're trying to get a bunch of conscripts for the Tsar's army, and you want to get a big army together. You could, I guess, try to motivate people in the old school way, that like you'd have like a lord would like ride around with like a troop of men and be like, join my army, and you just get conscripted and there's nothing you can do. Maybe you get lured into going on a crusade by like promises of gold and glory or something like that, or that you're going to get a share of the plunder, or that like the Pope wants you to do it or something like that. But I feel like raising an army in the past was more of a political craft, and now it's just print money, pay for it. And that like being able to print money is such a highly liquid and adaptable tool to get large numbers of people to do anything. It does seem sort of dangerous to have that be on the table.
That doesn't sound right to me. It's not required anymore with fiat currency to get anyone to participate in it. You just steal the value from them, whether they consent or not.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And only a very small amount of people in an office needs to actually want the war.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Because if you're with fiat currency,
you don't have to convince large amounts of people of anything.
But you can convince them by paying them. Like if you're like, we want to fund a war and we need 100,000 people to sign up for this army. Okay, that's going to have to pay these 100,000 people $1,000 a month.
Got it, yeah.
We're just going to invent this money. Here's the money. And then people are going to be like, well, it's a job. Sign up. Whereas if you physically couldn't, and people were like, I want the gold before I do this.
Yeah.
Well, then you're going to have to come up with a different strategy that involves something a little more creative than just paying people with fake money. Yeah, you know what was really interesting though about the idea of a fully deflationary currency, like Bitcoin, because like even so, like if the total fixed supply of Bitcoin caps out at a certain amount, what that means is that every single person who has a wallet and like accidentally like drops their phone in the water and they don't have any backup key or something, that Bitcoin is now gone forever, which means that everyone else's Bitcoin is a little bit more valuable. Compared to the amount of work that they had to do to acquire that Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So you are like it's basically, if you lose your Bitcoin, it's like you did the work for free for everyone else.
Yeah.
And that benefit gets like spread out over all the other holders.
But that's a short-term problem.
I don't see that as a problem, actually.
I mean, that's a short-term risk. It seems like we'll be able to like keep your wallet safe in some way to prevent, like, if you drop your phone.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to have to be a whole new system of splitting up and having split up redundant copies of all your money everywhere in a way. There'll have to be like this whole another layer to keep the money safe. Yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting to think about that, because I wonder what the world. Basically, it would be like the government. If there was sound money, governments would have to behave like other corporations in the sense that they wouldn't.
They'd have to provide actual objective value.
They'd have to actually. They'd have
survive.
to be sustainable. They'd have to be sustainable.
Yeah.
But you know what? From a certain perspective, governments are already subject to scarce capital. They're subject to limitations of scarce capital. It's just that I have this theory that capital is directly analogous to energy in a sense that like it can take many forms, and the forms are interchangeable with each other. I remember when I was in one of my favorite classes I ever took at Butte College was Professor White's physics class. Great teacher, and he explained energy in such a way one time where he's like, energy is like, we don't really know what energy is on a very fundamental level, but the best thing we can say about energy is that it's a thing that you can put in a bunch of different buckets. And there's like mechanical energy, there's kinetic energy, or there's potential energy, there's chemical energy, there's gravitational field, energy held in magnetic and gravitational fields. There's all these different forms of energy, and you can convert one from the other. Like you can have like object on top of a hill, potential energy, and then if you knock it down, it starts turning into kinetic energy. But at the end, after all the heat and the generated and the air currents and everything, if you sum all the energy of the whole system, everything that interacted with that tumbling boulder, you're going to get the same amount you started with. So you can solve problems that way by like looking at like energy balance and whatnot. Mm-hmm. However, it's really interesting to use that lens of different forms of energy to think about different forms of capital. So like from a government standpoint, we understand that capital in terms of like gold is a way of representing capital. Bitcoin is a way of representing capital. Dollars are a way of representing capital. But really, there's other forms of capital in the world, such as political power is also capital because it's scarce. And so what fiat currency is doing is if the government, like let's say Woodrow Wilson in World War I, doesn't have enough gold to fund a war, what he can do instead is go, okay, since I'm out of gold, I'm going to tap into my reserves of political capital called being the government and having the army, and say, we're going to just change the system and print all this money.
Well, so then what he did by doing that was he emptied the coffers of American trust.
Exactly. You're still spending scarce capital, you're just spending it from a different form. Like how when your body runs out of glucose in your blood, it starts eating its own muscles or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so because if you think about it, if a government did debase the currency to an extent to where the population became very restive and like pissed off, then eventually they would overthrow the government, and then that would represent the political capital of the government hitting zero. So that would be really destructive to everyone, in the same sense that starving your body until you die would be really destructive too.
Yeah.
So it is a good idea to have a limiting mechanism and to limit this game of capital to a kind of abstract, symbolic, socially agreed upon realm, so that you don't have to descend into violence. Yeah.
One of the things I'm sure I'll add, one of the prompts I'm sure I'll add this morning is my meditations last few weeks on the immovable mover, Aristotle's first cause set of thoughts about a first cause, and maybe what scalable proof of stake cryptocurrencies are intuitively trying to grapple with is that humans do create value, and a human is a potentially infinite fountain of value. And so finding more interesting and more accurate ways to express and articulate and quantify the different kinds and different amounts of value a person makes. Like physics, all energy stays the same. Energy can't be lost, and more energy can't be added into the system. But spiritually, I've never agreed with that. The immovable mover is within every human being in potential, and new value enters the system by way of humans. New ideas happen, and new technologies happen, and unforeseen windfalls happen. I still agree with the Bitcoin maximalist guy that for money to work the way money's supposed to, it can't have any inflation rate at all. We have to get, gold was great because its inflation rate was 1% or 2%.
Yeah.
And that's not sustainable for going forward into the future. We have to have a 0% thing.
I don't know if we have to have a 0% thing.
Michael Saylor's a different Lex episode about Bitcoin, his analogy was, okay, a wooden ship degraded by this many percent every year it was in use, giving it a lifespan of about 50 to 100 years.
Yeah.
And that was great until we had steel ships and their hulls didn't degrade. And that's just infinitely better than something that degrades by a few % every year.
I feel like, though, that if it degraded by a small amount every year and it was predictable, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, because then you would just have, you could just set interest rates in a way that would
but that's
compensate for
that's
that.
pointless workaround when you could just have something with a 0%
But like
inflation
even,
rate.
that's true. But in some, I feel like in some, from a philosophical perspective, I am partial to the 0% inflation being ideal, because to me what that means is that there's no statute of limitations on redeeming the voucher that you have got from society. In the sense that, like, if you were like a person who went to work one day and somebody paid you money and you did honest work and you got money and you're like, I'm just gonna keep this in under my mattress. 100 years go by. Philosophically, I think you should still be able to go buy something because you did, like, you should be able to take out what you put in.
Yes.
And there shouldn't be an expiry date on your ability to redeem this little implicit contract with society, with other people.
But what are you saying, that that's not realistic to find that?
Well, what I'm saying is that it's not that common of a scenario in which it's not really that common for money to be unused like that for such a long time. It's kind of an edge case.
Okay, but check this out. You can't do big... I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
That's okay.
You can make 50-year plans with money that you can track the inflation of, but you couldn't make 1,000-year plans.
No.
You couldn't find yourself with a Jeff Bezos amount of capital and then form a 1,000-year plan, set up a foundation that, like, from now on, every single person, regardless of background, that passes these standards is going to get this much money from this foundation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if I'm alive or dead, it's going to be that way for 1,000 years. And just projects, like, I'm going to build a bigger pyramid of Giza. Giza?
I think it's Giza. I don't know really how to say it.
You can't really move civilization forward into, like, exponential new achievements without exponential amounts of capital. And that capital has to be applied over vast amounts of time, and you can't have that with capital that's losing its value every year. You can't really build those, like, crazy pyramids.
But maybe it's good, though, that the expiration date of capital is around one human lifespan. Maybe that's a safety feature.
Well, it's a temporary safety feature, and it has to be shed eventually in our evolution.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
No limits.
If we become, like, 1,000-year beings or something.
Except no limits.
Well, I feel like having a system in which the decisions of people long ago, their decisions on how to allocate capital, might be its own kind of limit, actually, though, because it's limiting the people who are living in the present from having enough space.
You're totally right about that, yeah.
But what I was going to say about the flip side of this deflationary thing, I agree with from this philosophical position that there should not be that you should be able to redeem that, like, work done in 1975 isn't less valuable than work done yesterday. If you've been saving your whole life, that seems fundamentally unfair that people's work should be getting less relevant. But on the flip side, from a purely utilitarian kind of like social engineer point of view, there is a at least rational argument for having some inflation, because having some kind of amount of inflation incentivizes risk taking with capital. So if you're sitting on million and you know that it's going to be worth $950,000 in a couple years, and then it's going to be worth $900,000. You know what I mean?
You're encouraged to feed it back into the system.
You're encouraged.
Help the system.
You're encouraged to try to use that money to grow something, which then generates optimistically positive externalities.
See, I'm getting wary here because I'm just gonna we're just gonna default to a rehash of Lex's podcast with this safety and a moose guy.
Oh, did he make that argument too?
Yes. One version of that argument is that the economy wouldn't flourish if people weren't encouraged to reinvest their shit immediately into the system, the way knowing your money's getting devalued encourages you to spend it.
Right.
The economy is going to flourish no matter what. And his argument was that the big innovations of an internal combustion engine and the railroad and all the stuff that's set the wheels in motion that we're in now were made available in the gold standard days.
Interesting.
And people don't take risks out of their established careers if they haven't been able to accumulate gold in the mattress.
That's actually a really good point. That's a really good point. That, the whole industrial age took place before inflationary currency. That's a really good point.
And we're just running on the fumes of that fountain of innovation that a gold standard made possible for a moment.
Fascinating.
Is his argument.
Fascinating.
I can relate to that spiritually and intuitively, but not quantifiably with evidence so much. My personal situation is, I have to completely invest every dollar I make immediately, because that's the only stable savings account in a fiat economy, is investing in yourself and growing your skills.
There's nothing stopping you from buying silver or gold, though.
Yes, there is, because I get more return by buying more skill growth at this point in time.
Right.
So 100% of my fiat earnings just has to go into my ability to make value, my ability to innovate.
So what you're saying is that even if we were currently on a gold standard, you'd still be reinvesting all your money into skills.
No, if we were in a gold standard, there'd actually be a trackable argument for saving some of that money.
But what I mean is that right now you could buy as much gold as you want, and then that would not decrease in value.
But that would slow down my ability to make music and make art in a point where I have to go as fast and hard as possible.
Sure. I'm on the same page that I think that it is better. I'm in a similar situation where I feel like reinvesting money into your skills is the best bet. But if I did want to save money, I would buy silver coins.
Yeah,
as a savings account.
I think I might be buying Bitcoin and not gold or silver.
Gold and silver is even safer than Bitcoin, though.
I don't want to just rehash all these safety and arguments.
I like how his name is Safety, and it makes it sound like he's so conservative.
It's really strange.
It's like, couldn't your name be Donnie Danger or something? Are you trying to sell? See, if you're gonna sell me on a Ponzi. Hey, dude. Oh, you want to know something really funny? I saw this meme that was it was when people say Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme, and then it was a picture of the U.S. dollar with a literal pyramid on it.
Yeah.
I was like, why has no one really noticed that before? I love that. I love that there's a pyramid on the dollar. It's amazing.
Let's talk about the First Amendment and I'll probably want to shunt it to Terminator 2
Okay,
at some undetermined moment.
Those are definitely natural things just that flow into each other.
Well, Terminator 2 has guns and technology and Harley Davidsons and semis. And the First Amendment, free speech.
No, First Amendment's not like those other things. I was thinking of the First Amendment, like, I think that it's like, there is a political way of looking at the First Amendment. And that is where all the discussion gets, that's where all the airtime is about, like, you know, my right to say this, or my right to, you know, which is really important, very foundational political rights. But I feel like there's this other, I was just trying to think about, like, the First Amendment in just kind of like a broader sense of, like, more of a cultural, artistic, humanistic sense. Like, what kind of culture, what does a First Amendment loving culture feel like? What kind of emotional experiences are associated with this unstated belief in free thought, or free, like, basically like having a healthy relationship with new ideas, or not having a reactionary fear of new ideas, having the feeling that if everyone got to say everything that they wanted, that would be a good thing, instead of cultures where most people feel that if everyone got to say everything they wanted, things would fall apart. And I feel like our, at least mainstream media narrative, is that it's trying to convince people that people being able to think and speak freely is going to lead to a bad culture, you know. And it's this very fear-based, it's like a very fearful way of looking at other people, and it doesn't give humans enough credit for being the beautiful souls that we are. It's a sad way of looking at humans.
The basis of that way of looking at free speech is a belief that the power of evil is more powerful than the power of good.
Yes.
If you believe that, then you can't let people be free, because the evil urges will win over the good urges within the soul of man. And that's a self-defeating argument in my point of view, because if evil was more powerful than good, then the Big Bang would have self-annihilated about 1 second after it started.
And also, if you really believe that humans can't be trusted, then why even live? Just kill yourself. Like,
exactly, yeah.
Why even?
That's a different way of saying
It's a different way of saying that. It's why even pursue? Because it's like basically saying, if you think that there needs to be a trusted party that tilts the playing field in a way that it's going to compensate for what would happen, the evil that would happen if there was a level playing field of ideas, and there was like an enforced level playing field where you didn't get to silence or censor or artificially boost certain ideas. It speaks to these assumptions about the soul of humanity that...
The other reason to limit free speech is sensing that you will have to work for your living in a free speech society.
Oh, interesting. How do you connect that?
If you live in a free speech society, then the people who are willing to work harder and think farther are going to go too far ahead of you for you to leech off them. So you'll be forced to participate in that pursuit of radical new thoughts yourself. And that's hard work, and that's abhorrent to people who have lived their whole lives dependent on taking their ideas secondhand from other people.
So you're saying there's this kind of don't rock the boat aesthetic.
The weak can't catch up with the strong if the strong don't have limits on how strong they can get.
Well, I think there's also
and that's not true, but that's the intuitive fear-based scarcity sense of people who want to limit free speech. well, then I would have to try a lot harder
Yeah.
to participate in such an excellent society where the heroic people would actually be allowed to be heroes. That would make me obviously very small in relation,
Yeah.
and that'd be a very uncomfortable thing.
It also, yeah, it comes packaged with this cynicism about powerful, successful, strong people. It comes with this cynicism that people are always going to turn out to be villains when they're strong, and that there is no such thing as heroes. It's this denial of the heroic aspect of the human soul.
Yeah.
That like if we take all the guardrails off and we let people be as powerful as they can manage, that's going to be bad. That there has to be some. It's like this whole idea of where people say like billionaires shouldn't exist. Really? You don't want there to be really powerful people? Because I think that the worst situation is that there's bad powerful people. The second best situation is that there's no powerful people. But the best situation is that there's good powerful people. Like if you think like the world with good leadership is the best world, in my opinion. You can't. I don't know. It's like whether do you think if you take the guardrails off, if you expect things to go down the drain, then again I come back to this idea: why even live if you mistrust the basic nature of the human soul?
So the first danger you mentioned was big people that make a lot of power for themselves might be bad actors. We don't get to deny that. That happens in every scenario.
Yeah.
And free speech is the difference between if you have an ability to be resilient against those bad actors or not. Like the bad actors with a lot of power, they're here in life. You don't get to annihilate that. You get to choose if the population has free speech to defend themselves against that or not.
Yeah, it's like we have a certain systems that seem to reward the ascension of bad actors because evolution is going to proceed apace one way or the other. Like if people are not able to gain power in a way that's transparent, they're just going to gain power in a way that's underhanded and sneaky.
Yeah.
There's never been a society that has managed to figure out how to prevent leaders from rising to the top, and it's usually this gamble kind of situation where you just hope you live in a age of the good philosopher king that's going to just, that was lucky that we got like Marcus Aurelius and not Nero.
Yeah.
That was great. Oh, and then like a little later it's like fuck, and then later on like yay, it's good again. So you're just like whipped around by like the. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much been the story of organized human empires is just luck. It would be amazing if we could engineer a system that would be like. I think there's a fundamental trade-off though.
Well, the luck is short-term fluctuations.
Short-term fluctuations.
The long-term is progress and prosperity and joyfulness.
It seems to me that an ecology is, no pun intended, the gold standard of. That's not even a pun. That's a literal statement of fact. Yeah,
the gold standard of what?
The gold standard of political stability, because you can't have. There's just no other example of a stable structure in nature that is able to ward off cataclysm for indefinite periods of time, because every other system, every machine breaks down, but an ecology is a special case. An ecology is this game where you have all these machines constantly changing themselves to fit into the future.
Self-learning, a decentralized symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, an ecology is AI, it's intelligence.
Self-learning.
It's intelligence itself, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if society is built in such a way that it contains implicit intelligent adaptation mechanisms, then the future is fine because you're always right there there's not this tension.
So that's the argument in my view for 0% and inflation and the kind of money you're using.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero leakage of value over an infinite amount of time. Because what happens then, the gold in your mattress gets more valuable over time. It only gets more valuable. And that is the growth principle of ecology. Being allowed to happen with money as it happens everywhere else.
That's true, actually, because if you think, the market for energy that is the biosphere is deflationary, in fact. Well, actually, no, it isn't. No, it isn't actually, because you have sunlight. You actually have a certain amount of inflation in the biosphere, interestingly. It depends on the particular biome, actually. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Every ecological event is like a new niche to make more life.
But I just mean total energy input. Like there is a total, like if you have a field of a grass, there's like the little grass sprouts are like the miners in some sense that are mining food from sunlight, energy. And so ultimately, the Earth-Sun system is deflationary. In the sense the entire universe is deflationary, second law of thermodynamics style. But, there's different biomes of Earth that seem to get on just fine. Like there's deep sea ecosystems where literally the only food that comes in is just like the carcasses that rain down occasionally. Where if you are a fish that finds one, it's like you just found treasure and you're like, yay. And you're going to create a little colony of like worms until the whale carcass turns into bones, and then it's like party's over. Go back into hibernation spore mode for another 1,000 years until like another whale happens to land in this particular location. That's like if you had a fully deflationary, society or something, it would be like a treasure society in a way where like somebody would be like, we found a hard drive from 400 years ago that has 1 Bitcoin.
No, it's because the human has the immovable mover inside him and can plan for the next whale, can also plan for a desert of 0 whale carcasses for the next 2,000 years and innovate a new solution of like, well, I'm going to use this whale carcass to make an new kind of perpetual motion theme thing that's going to keep me at this level that this whale carcass got me to this higher level. I'm going to innovate a way to stay at this level until the next whale carcass comes. Animals can't do that.
Eventually, well, that is true. The biosphere did come up with some pretty great paradigm-changing technologies.
But I want to veer back to free speech.
Okay.
And we went over the reasons to limit free speech, but we didn't look at the kind of mind a free speech society makes possible. I at least know personally what happens to the existential experience when there's thoughts you're not allowing yourself to have, and when you're allowing yourself to think anything.
Yeah.
And growth is allowed to happen in one direction, and growth happens anyway, but gets greatly distorted in the censored direction. I don't know exactly what to say next. I think of comedy podcasts and Red Scare, where like there's, with comedy and with shows like Anna and Dasha, they're seeking these release valves of the most offensive things they can say and still like be socially allowed to exist.
Yeah.
And that's the value they're providing the society, is these release valves of like, the societal mind needs to be able to open this censored door. We are the only people that are socially allowed to open it right now. So we're going to open that door and say that bad thing. And now everyone who listens can like breathe a little easier.
Yeah, I know. that kind of release valve thing is really important. And, but I think when I was thinking about this First Amendment thing, I was wondering, like, if that is just the most politicized aspect of it, the release valve thing, but there's more of a positive...
There's a positive feedback system. There's the immovable mover. Aristotle's immovable mover can progress in joy and enlightenment independent of what the world is doing, because he can engage in personal contemplation. And you can only engage in personal contemplation, which is this infinitely ascending ladder to greater understanding.
Yeah.
You can only do that if you are allowing your thoughts to be free and allowing yourself to think anything.
Yeah, but I want to think about the First Amendment as this like emotional, through the lens of emotional freedom, like this general vibe where you just aren't afraid of yourself. You aren't afraid of the dark corners of your mind. And that is, of course, where your demons hide. And it almost seems like there's too many people pursuing the Howard Stern angle toward free speech. Like the kind of like, which is important, obviously. You have to push back against like censorship. But like, what if you just had like, that's like the little battles, but to win the war, you have to be creative and create beauty and like create like something that is can't be censored because it's too beautiful. Like beauty is hard to censor.
Well, it just provides too much practical value to the souls that perceive it, and they'll do anything to find that beauty, as censored as it is.
A flower doesn't want to be hidden.
So, I mean, are you trying to point at saying the emotional side of it and darker closets that you are ideally free to open within yourself? So you're wanting to look at the Jungian shadow integration type of thing?
No, I'm wanting to look at how we would approach. Let's say we were living let's say that this whole free speech issue was not even under threat. Like, let's say that like everyone, 100% of the people in America agreed that like, yes, free speech is good. I think that even in that situation, it would still be important to think about, okay, what does free speech mean? No one's trying to take it away from me, but what good am I doing with it? In a sense that like, because other people or the government censoring you is just one thing trying to censor you. There's also your own biases and limitations and cultural, like deeply inherited bullshit that is trying to block you. I mean, this is like one weird resonance with the postmodern vibe of like reality construction. I feel like that's almost like the First Amendment is like this grappling. It's like this ideal. It's this statement that the human soul is good, and if we unleash it, beautiful things will happen. And right now, we're just contenting ourselves with trying to like bat away the people who are trying to like shut us down for political reasons. But there's this deeper humanistic meaning to the First Amendment that is like this.
This is the reason there's any support for limiting free speech at all, is because people intuitively know that in a free speech society they would have to face those doors that they're censoring in themselves.
They would have to expose themselves to the beauty of the human soul.
And the demons of the human soul.
They've mistaken the human soul for just a big pack of demons or something. That's what they think the human soul is.
Well, they intuitively know that they have very weak muscles of how to face their own demons. And they know in a free speech society, there would be no excuse outside of your own weakness to not look at those things. And so there's political support for limiting free speech because there's individual will in these people to limit their own thoughts.
You know what's really interesting? Yeah, that makes me think of like how I'm just having some empathy for like old school conservatives back in the day, like I'm trying to, like you're like in the like early 50s or 60s or something like that. And then you find like, you're like threatened because now you can go to the video store and buy like a porn video where people are just like fucking and enjoying themselves, and then like it's a free country, anyone can go and just buy this like VHS tape. Mm-hmm. I'm mixing up my dates here. I don't know when. This is some imagined past time. Let's just say it doesn't. But the point is, conservative people who are really threatened by the fact that people can just are like two keystrokes away from the most depraved sex shit that like they just don't want to think about. So that is threatening as fuck. And those are like the demons of the. If you've raised in a church thing where like we just don't talk about sex at all. So even like I'm married to my wife and we've had sex, let's see, it's been like, we're up to like 25 times by now. You just don't really have a lot of comfortability with that part of your nature, and therefore you're hella threatened by these people who are way out there and making money with it too. So that's kind of like the flip side of, the new breed of religious conservative that is afraid to talk about certain things. It's just like society is constant. It's like we're just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're just mining deeper and we're like almost gotten down to the Balrog, the deepest buried demon that there is. I wonder if we're ever going to hit the bottom. And then free speech will be a total non-issue. That'd be weird.
Getting to the bottom of free speech will be like one of the only swords of truth we have to fight those bigger things.
Yeah. If maybe we'll get down to the fact, and we'll eventually in the future. That's weird to think about, like future political struggles, like future ideologies, like 1,000 years from now, humans have colonized space and we're still having the same bullshit political arguments about who's allowed to say what. But now we're talking about people, there's people who claim that that like God is the whole universe or something. Like we're grappling with like the deepest, like what kind of cosmic ideology bullshit is there in store for us when we dig down to that level? When, if you realize like that maybe it isn't arbitrary, like is there some kind of like politics of reincarnation that we just haven't even ventured into yet or something? Is there like is heaven and hell some kind of political realm that we just haven't even scratched the surface of yet?
The war in heaven between God and Lucifer's rebellion being just a series of political debates and politically trying to sway angels to one ideology or another.
That's fascinating to think about. Yeah, that's fascinating to think about that there could be some political bullshit going on in heaven that we're not know about.
Well, I think there is. Yeah. It would be conflicts of values.
Yeah.
Not like a war zone of like force.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. You can go to the scale of the entire universe and values are still a thing. They haven't gotten any less relevant. Billion years ago, there was still freedom and slavery.
Okay, so Terminator 2.
Terminator 2. That was an abrupt transition. Hold on, I gotta go take a leak. Just a second.
Okay.
We can launch into Terminator 2.
Well, Terminator 2 is about fulfillment of values.
Okay.
So Terminator 2 is value fulfillment of like the sickest values ever. Just human development and human achievement. The way cinema is like one of the ultimate art forms because it integrates the most art forms into one thing. And more than that, it integrates every human achievement ever into one thing. It's all the engineering and the best engineering possible, and the best script writing possible, and the best theater drama possible, and the best stories of heroic fulfillment of the human possible. And visually, just the best images possible. And seeking to integrate like an infinite army of artistic mediums and creative individuals, productive individuals under one vision to achieve one thing. So that's harmony.
Don't forget like the Howard Shore, Hans Zimmer, those
and the literal music, being
soundtracks of movies
good.
are some of the best music ever made.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the greatest values of the universe being harmony, cinema is where harmony can be enjoyed. Like the chorus is like bigger in that performance than in any other artistic thing. Just more people integrated harmoniously with each other. So that's amazing. Terminator 2 is amazing because you get to see the value of iteration happen, not just in technical terms, where James Cameron is a better director in the second film than he is in the first film, but in the development of his characters too. The protagonist in the first Terminator, Sarah Connor, is the victim and is the last girl, the horror movie term. The last girl is the one that survives.
Oh, gotcha.
Sarah Connors in Terminator 1 is the last girl in a horror movie and completely fucking scared and has to be saved by this heroic future man from this future villain demiurge, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then in Terminator 2, the next time you see her, she's fucking ripped, and she knows how to build guns and build explosives and break her way out of prisons, and she's a better actress too.
She's not like the helpless last girl.
No, she's this initiator.
Yeah.
Now. She has agency and she has competence, and it's just amazing transformation to see. Then another value, universal value, is Carl Jung, integration of opposites, and there's no masculine hero. There's only Sarah Connor having integrated her masculine. The masculine hero died and sacrificed himself in the first movie. And so what you see in the second movie is Sarah Connor has integrated her animus. And now she is father and mother to her son. And to achieve the victory of the movie and triumph over the new evil thing coming from the future, there's a protector robot that has to be sent from the future to protect Sarah Connor and Sarah's son. So the potential evil of machines itself has been integrated and made useful to humans and sent as a Arnold protector robot now. And so the very evil adversarialness of the whole plot of the movie has been integrated and made harmonious with the human family. And so now in the action scenes of Terminator 2 are a robot working with a kid, like a 12-year-old, working with Sarah Connor, like all in harmony to like drive the car while you while you reload the weapons while I shoot out the window.
That's beautiful.
And it's so beautiful.
How did you get onto this Terminator 2 thing?
Well, my mom looks like Sarah Connor. I grew up with these movies.
Okay, nice.
And my mom's name is Louisa Hamilton, and she looks exactly like Sarah Connor, whose real name is Linda Hamilton.
Weird. There's like a little glitch in the multiverse there or something weird.
And Louisa was a single mom and very integrated with her animus, and was providing a lot of the masculine strictness as well as the mothering love. And then it's also the robot part of it is a 21st century child has to integrate with the monolith of non-understandable technology.
Yeah, the kid in the unreasonably proficient kid in the sci-fi movie is a trope where the kid's just this is normal to me.
Yeah.
You're you're gonna do good, kid. Yeah.
Oh, and then the final thing is the robot becomes more human by being a part of this family. And his last line is, "I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do."
Get to the chopper. Yeah.
So
interesting.
All the opposing forces integrate and become better by relating to the other opposing forces.
And don't forget that Arnold Schwarzenegger's actual body is a robot body with human flesh over it too.
That's right.
So, which is even his body is integration of.
That's right. Yes.
Bionic and biological technology.
Yeah.
Wow. Integration.
And I'm meditating on the immovable mover, Aristotle's first cause idea, and James Cameron is one of those. He initiates. He creates worlds unto himself. He organizes people to create things that he discovered in the solitude of his own mind. And he creates jobs by doing that, and he creates value. Thus, he creates money by doing so. And he creates joy and beauty and visions of triumph. And with the robot sci-fi theme, he creates ways into the future for us.
Do you think when you're looking at when you watch Terminator, in some sense, you're just looking at James Cameron? You're
Yes. Yes.
It's part of his body, kind of.
You're looking at his soul made manifest.
Yeah. Do you think when people make jobs, is the benefit that they're giving away for people to make money, or they're giving some people something to do? You know what I mean?
Well, the fact that it makes money is an offshoot of the fact that he's giving them something to do.
Yeah.
Money comes from meaning. Of course, he's made some really bad movies, too.
That probably still made money.
Well, Titanic isn't very good, I don't think.
You don't think Titanic's very good?
No.
Well, then you will be pleased.
Hey. And it made, all the money possible.
Then you will be pleased to know that I've never seen Titanic. Never have.
It's not very good.
It's this weird, and then I just hold on. I sort of, at this point, it's a joke that I just having never seen Titanic, because it's ridiculous, because then it just leads to this conversation over and over. You've never seen Titanic? No. But I don't need to because I know what happened to the actual Titanic.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure this movie, in my mind, I just have to just think about Leonardo DiCaprio and like, I've seen like memes of like, I've seen the movie by being steeped in this culture. I don't need to actually sit through it.
You've been living inside the effects of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's like a scene where like they have like steamy sex in like something, and then there's like
in a carriage
and then
car,
there's like the tragic scene where they're like, no, there's not enough. This thing, we can't both float on this. That's fucking. This is so dumb.
Yeah.
Like just tread water. Doesn't have to be tragic. It does. It does. Goodbye, my love. Like, this is how the movie ends. Okay, fair enough. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a great movie just because it's so, like, if something is memeable, it's great in some sense, right?
That's, I guess.
Right?
Like, the Star Wars prequels are, like, infinitely memeable, but...
Are they really?
Yeah, they've had a whole, like, second revival of popularity because of how funny the memes are.
That's just because culture is going through a 2000s decade nostalgia trip right now.
Yeah,
I think that's a big part of the reason that Gen Z TikTok people have rediscovered indie sleaze, as it were, and are now dressing like
you see,
millennials in middle school.
No, it's worse than that. They're dressing like the way I dressed in junior high with like baggy pants and Jinko and sagging off your ass shit.
Exactly.
But it's this like simultaneous thing, like a Bill and Ted, like all the different times they traveled to, like suddenly coinciding into one moment.
Yeah.
Like, we have no new fashion, no new anything, so everyone's just picking their own decade they like the best.
It's a kaleidoscopic kind of reality. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're seeing...
I'm cool with it.
You're seeing kids... You're seeing a 14-year-old boy over here who's dressed like a jock, over there who's like super dapper and doing the indie lumberjack pathway, and then another guy who's sagging pants and wearing a beanie and like way too big stuff, like the fashion that stopped being cool in '98.
I love the indie lumberjack pathway. That is a valid pathway into the future for many. That's true. Yes, I think I would have been in various other forks of the multiverse. I would have been at risk for the indie lumberjack pathway, but Circuit Fate has conspired to steer me away from those rocky shoals. Unfortunately, didn't fall into that.
I've always felt very forced into very specific pathways. Like, I'm not sure I feel like I've had much like choice fashion-wise or like career-wise. And
you were marked as a child.
And I think that's a veil of illusion a potential immovable mover has to go through. Is in Frank Herbert's words, they feel the terrible purpose.
Yeah.
And you're at risk of feeling victimized by your destiny, when really once you get enough space from it and can choose it or not, you go, oh, well, that's exactly what I want to fucking do. But until you get to that point, it's like, oh, I have to do this. If I don't make music, I'm going to self-destruct. If I don't do blank, I'm going to self-destruct. Like James Cameron, if I don't like make this screenplay with oil paints while I'm working as a semi-truck driver about Terminator 1, if I don't like make this screenplay...
Was he really a semi-truck driver? Mm-hmm. That's kind of cool resonance with you.
I know.
Being a truck driver, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, it can look like a curse. But I don't know. I don't think it is. It's just, there's pain involved. And that can make it seem like a curse sometimes.
Yeah.
guess my last words will be trying to like put a pin in the free speech thing by remembering a story of Carl Jung's in his memoir, where his story as he tells it is of being forced into free speech, I guess, and free thought by what he calls God. Like God would not let him censor any part of his processes. And in his experience, God himself was presenting him with the most profane images his imagination could look at from an early age. Like, he describes some dream when he's like 8 or 10 and growing up in church and trying to learn about God and faith and stuff from the priests. And then he has this dream where he's like in the inner sanctum of a church and this giant cock just breaks through the ceiling. I'm completely botching the story, but like a giant phallus just shatters through the stained glass ceiling and is from God, but like has an eye at the top of the erect cock or something.
Nice.
But like constantly getting visions of that kind that forced him to really not allow any rules to be set if he wanted to have an authentic relationship with God.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that Carl Jung had those kind of profane visions as a child. Interesting. That's making me think. It's giving me like German nightclub vibes. Giant phallus in a church, like.
Yeah, so maybe
while techno music is like.
So maybe that's just the part of the world he was living in. It's just in the air.
Some intensity over there. But like, I'd say that as a joke, but also there's a slight little part of that isn't a joke. That like. There is some kind of divinity in like those like Bergheim or whatever, just like the gayest nightclub you can imagine, where there's just like, where it's like if you like show up at the front door and you aren't being like let in by the balls by like your like leather daddy master, it's like, oh, you're not cool enough, like. You can't come in here. Like, this is a place of utter debauchery. Like, there is a certain divinity to that, where it's like this, there's a certain kind of, like, certain consciousness that is, like, informing. It's a Luciferian kind of feeling to it,
If it puts you outside the recognized bounds of culture, then it puts you where new value can be found.
Yeah.
And finding new value and making new value, that is a divine phenomenon.
Yeah.
Okay.